what are the metrics of identifying whether your business is successful or not? And I would argue that rather than the number of new people coming in, how many of the people that you treat actually come back?
So following on from, I guess, talking about finances, etc., I think a lot of new injectors, or maybe even, more experienced injectors, they often don't understand their financial position or their salary.
Yeah.
Obviously, you do a tax return at the end of the year and you sort of know, but I think as people go, they sort of see a lot of money coming in, but they don't necessarily think about, all the money they're paying on indemnity insurance and stock and all the kind of, disposable costs of dressing packs and needles. And, I think it's important to sort of have a grip on where you are day to day or week to week rather than year to year.
Yeah.
Do you see that with injectors?
Of course. I mean, I see it with a lot of injectors who work in a chain clinic and then like the idea of starting their own business. And when everything's been provided to them before, like there's just, as you said, dressing packs and gauze and needles and all that sort of stuff's there. Hylays, gloves, all that kind of stuff. And just all the equipment to deck it out, bed and bed sheets and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, and having the cash flow to order the stock.
Yes. Because
the stuff's not cheap. And so I think a lot of injectors leave sort of the safety or the nest of like a chain clinic or being in a larger team and go out on their own, and they're suddenly quite consumed with constant costs. Yeah, and I think that it's important that before you make that decision is to actually go through the process of creating a spreadsheet. Yeah, which is pretty simple to do in Excel. You can learn it basic formulas pretty easily. Even I figured it out, and I'm not an Excel guru by any stretch of the imagination. And actually creating a budget and actually working out what your true profit margin is on a treatment. And they also come down to setting your prices. I do see a lot of injectors, and this is quite Australian specific, but they're modeling what they're going to charge as a solo injector on what they used to do in a chain clinic. I'm like, why? For so many reasons why, but one, because you're not going to earn much. But also, why are you trying to compete with that market when you're not in the market anymore? Well, and also you're not going to be able to get all those supplies as cheap as those chain clinics were, because they're using their large buying power with like multiple injectors and multiple locations to negotiate a really cheap price with the supplier. You're not going to get that anymore. Unless you join some sort of buying group for product, but I don't think there's buying groups for like.
Not allowed. I'll just put it out there.
Oh, is that not allowed now?
Look, I think traditionally it was sort of just not even accepted, just sort of ignored as just a thing. But
well, for example, if you join Fresh Clinics,
okay, well, we won't call it a buying group. It's different.
But there are strategies that you can get stuff slightly cheaper.
I guess what people who don't understand what we mean. So historically, years ago, you would have a prescribing doctor, because in Australia you need a prescribing doctor as a nurse to facilitate your injecting, and that doctor would look after a harem of like 50 nurses, not really having any real oversight over any of them particularly. And it's just that they had 50 people under one account getting a better deal. That's what we mean by a buying group. And obviously, just by the way I'm describing it, it doesn't sound great, but that was accepted at some point, and now I don't think it is.
So I think the takeaway point there was that things are not going to be as cheap as they were. So don't model your new business off what the clinic that you're working at bought them for. Because that's probably not going to be the case.
You'll be pretty poor pretty quickly.
So budgeting is important. You need to go through the process of actually working all that out so that you can set your prices appropriately, because you may need to increase your prices, and maybe that's fine. Because now, rather than seeing 15 patients in a day, you're seeing 6 patients in a day, but those 6 patients you're spending a longer time with. It's a different experience for those patients.
You consult properly with them.
I mean, and
it's not
treatment plan. And that's not to say you can't consult properly in the chain clinics, but just taking a different approach.
More time.
Could impact.
And even if it's just perception, make your patient feel really valued.
Well, because at the end of the day, I mean, there are a lot of good injectors. I think, to be a great injector is difficult, sort of like that law of diminishing returns. To be the difference between being a good injector and a great injector, each little sort of incremental increase in your skill is harder and harder to achieve the better you get. But I think there are a lot of good injectors out there.
For sure.
And so what differentiates you from all the other injectors? Is it the way you do your Botox, your fillers? Maybe not. But how does that patient feel when they're with you?
Yeah.
Do you have a rapport with them? Do you have a connection? Do you make them feel important when they sit in front of you? Are you attentive? Do you communicate with them in a way that makes them feel comfortable and they're confident that you understand their needs, and you're confident as a provider that they understand your philosophies and what you're prepared to do and what you're not.
Yeah.
And that relationship. And I think that that's what differentiates a lot of injectors from each other. It's not the actual aesthetic outcome, it's the experience.
I think when we had Penny, our friend Penny Timberlake on many episodes ago, like episode 30 or something.
Yeah, right.
She talked about the X factor.
Yeah.
You're right. It's your results could be fine, but maybe not outstanding. But your patient feels like this person's got my back. This person's nice to be with. We have a fun together. We you ask about their family, whatever your connection is.
Yeah.
But they enjoy seeing you.
Yeah. Well, think about a restaurant. The food could be amazing, but the service is shit.
Yeah.
And the ambience is shit. And it doesn't matter how good the food is. And the food, I'm sort of relating to the actual treatment.
We got that.
Yeah, I just could ruin the whole experience. And it might not be somewhere that you want to go back to, but there might be a place that does pretty decent food, but you love being there. The vibe's great. All the wait staff are amazing. You say hi to the chef when you walk in. You've got your regular seat.
Hey, and like Fonzie when you walk in.
Yeah, yeah, and that might be. And to a large extent, I think that is almost as powerful, if not more powerful, than the actual food
more
itself.
Important.
Yeah.
You feel welcomed and valued and liked.
And I think that a lot of people focus too much on the clinical side. I'm not saying you shouldn't, you definitely should, but don't forget the other things, which are equally or if not more important to your patient experience and retention. And we were talking about this again downstairs, was looking at, what are the metrics of identifying whether your business is successful or not. And I would argue that rather than the number of new people coming in, how many of the people that you treat actually come back?
Yeah. Well, that's your value of did it work and were they happy?
Yeah, because you see a lot of these clinics, especially a lot of the chain clinics, they spend so much money on marketing and like social media campaigns and refer a friend campaign and every conceivable option to drag patients in, and then they never come back.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Because they've come for the cheap deal or the free whatever. Yeah. And then they're like, well, I'll just look for the next deal.
Yeah.
And I know we've kind of joked in the past about Groupon deals.
Yes.
Groupon, Scoopon, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't work because they're not coming for you. They're coming for a bit of money off.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're not allowed to advertise injectables, at least here in Australia, as a incentive. Like you can't do like a deal for people.
Yeah.
It's got to be a consistent price throughout and you've got to advertise in another way.
Yeah.
But, just the premise of doing deals, it's just a bit crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want that person to come back because they like you and they liked your treatment.
Yeah. Generally the tire kickers will give you the most headaches as well.
Oh yeah.
They're the most demanding. They want everything for nothing. You could do something for free and they'll still complain. It's just the nature. It's just the nature of that demographic of people. I try and avoid them at all costs. People, and you get pretty good at identifying them pretty early on.
Yeah. Going back to what we're saying about new injectors as well. And you're sort of talking about the technique's got to be good. Of course, it's got to be good. But I do feel even with some of the training that some of the pharma companies give or some of these third-party courses that are done, the focus is very heavily on the technique and the anatomy and all that stuff, which of course you've got to know. But there's no thought process about consent. All the soft touches that we just spoke about how do you interpret body language and
all the soft skills,
all that kind of stuff, bedside manner, and obviously facial assessment and working out, well, sure, you can do a tear trough technically, but is it right for that person? Just all these things that I think you can learn with the experience. But I wonder if there's a way of formally learning some of it, or at least acknowledging what you're not good at and focusing on it. Have you found that with your injectors, that they've sort of been trained, but they're not really rounded trained? Well,
and that's where I guess my value has been in the business, is to have those conversations.
Because you've seen it all before.
I've seen it all before. In terms of making, a lot of the time it's even just making people aware, because it's sort of like the forgotten skill set that's just glossed over or overlooked because you're so focused on the clinical outcome and the rheology of this filler, and if I'm going to use a cannula, like all these technical things, which are obviously very important to know. But even just being aware of them is like the first step. in implementing them into your practice and the way you present, the way you dress. Like, what do your treatments look like? Do you look like a freak show? Are you going to scare off patients that potentially don't want that look?
Yeah.
Not judging anyone. I mean, everyone's entitled to sort of do what they want for themselves, but have an understanding of what type of patient you're trying to attract.
Yeah.
And everything needs to marry up with that and be consistent. If you've got a very exaggerated look, you're probably going to alienate a lot of people who maybe don't want to look that way.
Yeah.
Or if you have a very natural look, you're probably, maybe you're not going to get as many of those sort of exaggerated patients coming in, and that's okay. So you can't be everything to everybody. It's about being true to yourself and then attracting the people that are on the same journey, on the same page as you.
Thanks so much for watching the video. If you want to listen to the whole podcast, go to your favorite podcast app and search for Inside Aesthetics.
If you like the videos we're putting out, please consider subscribing to our channel. Give us a like, smash the bell icon so that you get notified when we put out more content.
If you'd like to support us, our Patreon link is down below, and you can also follow us on Instagram on our personal accounts.